Talk Show. Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue our series of horror movies on Netflix with the 1984 Stephen King classic, Children of the Corn. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have. So warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, writer of the Ben 10 comic series from IDW. With me from Austin is Drew Edwards, writer of the long-running Halloween Man, now from Monsterverse Comics and a contributing writer to Rockabilly Online and Monsterverse's Tales from the Grave. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Hello. Also in Austin, Mr. Tony Salvaggio, writer of the Victorian mech comic Clockworks from Humanoids and Psycom, the manga from Right Stuff and Tokyopop, lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars. Say hello, Mr. Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. And also in Denver with color commentary, host of the mom-oriented podcast Pod Moms, as always, attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, now, as we mentioned last week, more to the point, this series you're listening to is not just any series of horror movies and not just any series of horror movies on Netflix, but it's a series where each week one of us chooses the movie and everyone else has to watch it, which is different from how we usually do it, where we just sort of bat a list around and we finally come across, what we're going to watch, and we vote and we move things up and down the ladder. This time, no. It was more like last week, Drew had us watch Troll Hunter, and this week's movie was chosen by me, and that is Children of the Corn.
So now, it's a dictatorship instead of a democracy.
Yes, yeah, but you're a dictator for a week, and then you come back.
King for a week.
Yes.
For a week.
Or
yes.
queen.
A very, very little-known 50s quiz show, Queen for a week. Children of the Corn, according to Wikipedia, is a 1984 supernatural horror film based on the 1977 short story of the same name by Stephen King, says Wikipedia. Directed by Fritz Kirch, the film stars Peter Horton and Linda Hamilton, set in the fictitious rural town of Gatlin, Nebraska. The film tells the story of an entity referred to as He Who Walks Behind the Rose, which entices the children of the town to ritually murder all the adults to ensure a successful corn harvest. And a couple driving cross-country, they got caught up in it. Filming took place mainly in Iowa, but also in California, and there have been 7 sequels to this. There's also been a Sci-Fi Channel remake, and one of those sequels might have been the Sci-Fi remake. In other words, I'm not sure how many sequels, but basically there's this movie plus 7 more if you want to have, just spend your weekend watching Children of the Corn movies. So, 1984. Yes, Tony?
Nothing.
Oh, I thought you were saying. Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know why you'd want to see the sequels, to be honest with you, but you could if you wanted to punish yourself. If you felt like I've been terrible, what's one of the least things I could do to punish myself?
I really like this movie for I'll tell you exactly why, and we'll get into it more later, but the scenery. Because you can watch a movie like Nebraska, and it's like, Bruce Dern and I are going to wander around and get into fights with Stacy Keach. Or you can watch this, and it's the same stuff, only this one has, like murderous children.
And the other one is an Oscar nominee, so there you go.
Well,
we can figure out a way to combine both, I'm sure.
I can't explain the taste of the culture. I cannot. I have had enough time explaining my own taste. All right. First impressions, I don't think we've done this combination. Let's go Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll go, and my first impression will just be explaining why in the world I made you watch this movie. So, Julia, and let's keep these to like 30, 45 seconds so we can move on to the topics. Julia, first impressions, Children of the Corn.
Gosh, I just did not like this movie. I actually want to ask, but I don't necessarily want to ask it just yet, but I want to ask of you guys later, why is this movie even a classic? Because it's kind of terrible. And I did want to say in my 30 or 40 seconds that I was just looking at IMDb about this movie, and it says, in one of the discussions, it says, did Stephen King like it? And somebody posted a quote from a book called The Films of Stephen King, and he says, my feeling, it says, for most movies made from his book, it's like a guy who sends his daughter off to college. You hope she'll do well. You hope she won't fall in with the wrong people. You hope she won't be raped at a fraternity party, which is pretty well what happened to Children of the Corn.
Oh, my God.
That was really funny. Anyway, so that's, yeah.
I can't
I
follow
have
that
some
from
answers.
Drew.
I have some answers for that question of why is this a classic, I think. But, yeah.
Save that for when we're in the topic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Drew, first impressions, children. I'm curious if you've seen this movie before. Julia, had you seen this movie before?
I used to really like this movie when I was a kid. You know, back in the late '80s, and I used to like renting this movie on VHS. And this is an example. You always hear this, but this is an example. Sometimes you revisit something from your childhood, and it just ends up being terrible. This movie is abysmal. Like, it is so bad. And I just, because I was excited about doing this movie, and like now I'm like sharpening my claws and fangs because I want to rip this movie a new asshole.
I can't wait to discuss it. I totally can't, because I have a feeling I'm not going to come down as hard on this movie as you did. But that's, thank goodness. I don't know, it's always good when there's at least one of those. Tony, what are your thoughts, Children of the Corn?
I don't think I hate it as much as Drew in, like, as far as watching it again. But I did feel like, wow, you know, there's like a lot of shocking parts. And I remember thinking, like, oh, man, there's no way I should watch that. It's going to be, you know, so scary and everything when I was a kid, and it kind of was. But watching it now, it's kind of just, I didn't think it was terrible,
goofy.
but I also don't think it was great, you know? Like, it just kind of breezes through. And I apologize. I have crazy allergies, so if I cough some on the podcast, I apologize to everybody listening. It may happen. So anyway, it's okay. Would I see it again after this? That would be hard, unless it was for some kind of research, because it's just kind of, I don't know, on rewatch. But I remember it being, like, you know, a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was going to talk about whenever we, you know, hit Julia's topic I don't know. It's got some good shocking parts, but overall, I don't know. It doesn't really do it for me anymore, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, and my first impression, and also why did I force you guys to watch this? And I'll demur some of it as when we get into the next topic of why this is a classic. But I chose this movie because, you know, we've done a number of Stephen King pictures, but I had not seen Stephen King's Children of the Corn since the 80s at least, and there it was on Netflix. And out of all the different options that I have, you know, hundreds and hundreds of, maybe thousands of horror movies, I was like, I want to re-explore this movie, you know, because I remember it being so important and watching it. And so it was literally, this is one that I just chose because if you ask people, hey, do you remember Children of the Corn? They can actually summon up images from it that are still, you know, fresh in their mind, or at least are impressions that they have, you know. And I think that's probably what all of us were thinking of when we got into this movie. So Julia, why don't you cue us up with your topic?
Well, okay, so obviously I've been hearing about this movie, and you asked if I'd seen it before. I think I may have seen it a million years ago with my dad, because my dad is Stephen King, you know, fanatic. But I don't really remember it, and so maybe I didn't. But anyway, I've heard about it my whole life, and so I was always thinking, well, obviously it's a great film, and it's just really not. So I guess my question is, how did it come to be so very famous? I mean, I understand it's famous as a story, but why is it famous as a movie? Anyway, so I'm just curious what you guys think.
I mean, go ahead, Tony. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think rewatching it, and I was kind of thinking the same thing, actually, is that I think it came out in a time where, like, oh, man, another, like, a Stephen King adaptation, you know?
Right.
A book that, wow, Children of the Corn, he's writing these books, and they're really scary, and it's got kids that kill their parents, you know, so all the kids who could rent if you couldn't see in the theater, you could rent it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, oh man, that's a big deal. It's like, rock and roll, but it's religious, that kind of thing, like the rebellion aspect of it as well. And, it's pretty shocking. Like Jason was saying, you can summon up images of, from it. And so I think all of that stuff is why we were like, and, it's got some good bits and why it was relevant, especially at the time. And so I think probably the idea of Children of the Corn and what we came away with it, from it when we were younger is different than, as we all can, I think, attest, the actual movie, objectively is a different experience, I think. So even though, there are a lot of good bits, but there's also a lot of really questionable bits, too. And, is it, like most of those adaptations when they were on that kind of roll, most of them aren't that close to the book or barely related, but, Hollywood's like, hey, there's this guy, we got to have one, too,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that's, that's the way it goes. So, we get what we get, and some of them are good, and some of them are middling. A couple of them are terrible. So
Stephen King at the time
I'd still rather watch Silver Bullet than this now, in retrospect.
Yeah.
That's pretty much
Don't
maligned.
be disrespecting Silver Bullet.
No, well, I would say that Children of the Corn is less maligned than Silver Bullet, but yet Silver Bullet, in my mind, is a better movie, or more enjoyable movie, anyway.
Way more entertaining than this. Like I kept feeling like I wanted to nod off.
So
yeah,
your feeling
exactly.
was that it was
It's
a little
bland,
long and dull.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk in a little bit about the presentation, like how literally the film is filmed and what it looks like. But that's the stuff that you realize when you watch it and you are confronted with the reality of this movie you remember called Children of the Corn. But in my mind, why is it a classic? I think it's a classic to most of us who never intend to ever watch the movie again, so we carry stuff. And if you had said to me, hey, Jason, what do you think of when you think of Children of the Corn? I would have said, I remember them turning off on a road and being surrounded by rows and rows of corn as the road gets narrower and narrower, and they're trying to find their way out, and they're lost in corn rows in a car. And I was like, that is something that anybody who's ever driven anywhere that has corn can completely identify with, that's, and it's so American, I can't think of any other place in the world where it would resonate with you, this notion of being capable of getting lost in a cornfield,
And yet,
yeah,
this movie doesn't do anything. It's not atmospheric at all. Like the description you're giving is atmospheric, but there's nothing that's really different.
They do it when the little boy is running away with the suitcase.
Yeah,
he's seeing the kids laughing and all that. But Jason, also not just anybody who's been around corn in the fields, but also if you've been to a cornfield, the corn maze in like a pumpkin farm or something like that.
I bet the corn mazes would not be the phenomenon they are if the movie Children of the Corn had never come out.
No, I don't think about. I don't know
about that because they've been kind of a. Yeah, they're pretty.
I don't remember. Maybe they were a big deal, but I don't remember corn mazes existing. Honestly, when I was a kid, I don't remember like October. Hey, let's pay some money and go do a corn maze. In fact, that seems to be, maybe that was happening a lot, and my parents and my friends just weren't into it. But that seems to be I would love to see when that became like a phenomenon that was just happening in every state. But I remember that image, of getting lost in the corn. And Drew's right. It's my memory that's painting the actual artistry on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that kid, because it's at the center of the child cult that is killing adults and sacrificing to whatever weird corn god they're sacrificing to. There is a leader of the religious community, and he's called Isaac. And I remember that guy, and we can talk about him a little bit now.
He's pretty cool in his like creepy quasi-Amish
Yes.
thing that he's got. Like, he's cool. He's like the only thing about the movie that is cool. Like, and his coolness is sort of undermined by the fact that his right-hand man is probably the lamest villain in the history of horror movies.
Yes.
I actually think that they cast the kids all right, is what I was thinking. I mean, it doesn't do a lot, but I think
kid. I don't know.
That kid, like, they all seem like kids in small town. Like, to me, they seem pretty authentic as far as what you would get if you went to a small town. Those are the kids who are there.
I just
like,
think that kid. I just think like Isaac is so creepy and kind of mysterious.
And let's describe him. Just so we know, Isaac is supposed to be, God knows, like 11 years old or something, and he's this brown-headed kid who wears a big sort of parson's hat all the time, and a kind of a black, I don't know, Amish suit. He dresses like a traditional, country preacher. Like in that Sunday cartoon about the country preacher who travels around and says witty things to the guy at the corner store, and so he dresses like a parson, and he talks. He has this weird nasal rasp voice that is just inhuman. I mean, it sounds.
It is. It's really weird.
It's the most amazing thing, and I remember thinking at the time that it was almost like he was a special effect. And I have to say now, watching it, he almost is a special effect. He's almost the most special thing in the whole movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he elevates every scene he's in.
Oh, absolutely. So this is an amazing guy. This guy, his name is John Franklin, and he's actually about 24 years old. He is, as we see him in this movie, playing the 11-year-old Isaac. How old he is. John Franklin is actually 24. He's just graduated with a teaching degree and a BFA from the University of Illinois. So he's an adult. He's fully trained. He's ready to go, and he's just turning in this sort of amazing performance because he's very small. That's the one thing that is he has this particular disorder that's causes his body to be stunted. He has the Gary Coleman disease. So he's wonderful. I think if you took him out of this movie, I think people probably wouldn't remember it as a classic because you'd be left with corn.
Oh, absolutely not. Like I think that he's definitely, because I mean when I was thinking about it when I remembered from it when I saw it when I was a kid, he was the thing I remembered.
Yeah. Because I didn't remember the slaughter of the parents in the beginning. I didn't remember Linda Hamilton particularly. Peter Horton from 30-something is the male lead. I didn't remember anything. I remember that kid, and I remember them getting lost in the corn. That's sort of why it was a classic. But let's talk particularly about when we get into this, Tony. When this movie opens, the whole point is that these two sort of middle-class, just graduated doctor and his girl are going on a drive. I don't even remember why precisely, but they're going on a drive through the countryside, and they get into all the shenanigans of Children of the Corn. How do you talk to me a little bit about what this movie teaches us about small-town folk? and how does what are we to make of all of this?
I don't know. Okay. Case in point, I lived in a really rural area. Like my graduating class, my parents moved us from Texas to Mississippi when I was just getting out of kindergarten. It was 45 minutes to get to the nearest movie theater. It was 15 minutes to get to like an actual grocery store. Like, a big grocery store, at least like 15, 20 minutes, by car. And so my graduating class was like 30-something people, and I spent my first grade through 12th grade in I went to one school, one complex. That was probably as big as, I think it's bigger now, but. So dealing with I don't know, there was a lot of Southern Baptist stuff that maybe isn't too far from what they're talking about. I mean, it was holy as opposed to unholy, But
there's a point where they're driving
you know,
in their car and they listen. That the only thing they can find are the Holy Rollers.
Well, there was that, and it was country. There was a country station close by,
right.
and that's what you picked up. You know, and except eventually,
and I can completely identify with that. I mean, there are swaths of Texas that you drive through, and there's nothing but country and maybe one Tejano station, and then there's several preaching stations and one Christian rock. And that's
and here's the thing, like I don't think this one is as egregious. In fact, I think it's still got some of the Stephen King hallmarks where he, likes the working man. Like there's the guy at the auto shop, right?
Right.
And we identify with him. I mean, these are like, salt of the earth people. It's not the same hick fetishism that we see in maybe like a Rob Zombie movie or like where he got it from, where it became that thing of like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre really pushed that to the forefront. Or like, there's all kinds of rape revenge ones that have the same thing. I think, but the scary part, we had just the opposite. Like when I was growing up, it was like, everything is about like how if you play D&D and listen to metal music, you're a Satanist already. Satanic. You may not even know it.
Satanic, right?
And so, like, I think that's another reason why this may have resonated as kids. Is just like, see, look, these are the bad kids. Like they have a cult. But in general, it's children of the damned without like some of the psychic powers.
That's right. It is very similar to Villages of the
And I don't think, like, when you say, like, how does it treat these people in small town fairly? We don't even really see enough of them before they're really slaughtered wholesale, in a revolution of sorts. I think it's pretty, I guess that the kids are counting on he who walks behind the fields or whatever they call him.
He walks between the rows.
Yeah. He walks between the rows. Like, to heal people and stuff because they kill everybody. Like, there's no doctors. I guess they're going to hang out there, so they don't need cars, so they don't need any repairmen or anything. That's just gone. That infrastructure is gone. So the kids have to rely on, hopefully, I guess, the guy who knows the most, like took the most shop class, is going to really win out by the end of it.
This
so
is
I don't know.
3 years. 3 years supposedly that they've been doing this. They've been surviving, which I find it. This is going to sound really silly to say this, but I find that unrealistic.
Well, I was just it just seemed like a
unrealistic. Huh?
Maybe that's it. Maybe the supernatural element like takes care of them. That's what I kind of got the impression of.
The supernatural stuff is so ill-defined, though. Like they don't really say like what this God is actually doing for them. I kind
of wish that there was that he who walked behind the rows was just a made-up creature created by Isaac. It would have been more satisfying.
Yeah, because what happens? Let's do a little bit of plot there in case anybody who's listening hasn't seen
and
it.
also I know Drew wanted to talk about this topic a little bit, but go. Recap the plot a little bit here so that we can explain what the heck we're talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and somebody else can do it too. I was just going to say that there is that toward the end of the movie we suddenly have this being, this I don't even know what you would call it, that is moving through the fields, and it's just kind of like this force under the earth that moves around and then can do things. Like at one point takes over Isaac, who has been strung up on the cross by his faithful assistant Malachi. Has put him now on the cross, and the cross, by the way, is like what they do they had to put this police officer, and they call him the Blue Man. They put him up there.
Yes.
But anyway, so they put Isaac up there, and so this creature thing takes over Isaac and just kind of fills him with energy, light, or whatever, and then suddenly now Isaac basically is possessed. But it's just kind of this whatever. It's like this unseen force that's underneath and between the corn. Anyway, I just wanted to say that so that anybody who hadn't seen it would know.
I think, I would have been happier if they'd kind of not. I know they were trying, like, with some cool special effects, but if the special effects are not that cool, like, they could have done a lot to cut away. I think we talked about that before. A lot of times you can get a lot more creative, like, I wish they could have spent that elsewhere because, man, it does not it does not hold up, unfortunately. Maybe it did. Maybe it was cool at the time, but I don't know. But yeah, that I would have liked to have seen a lot more cutaways and a lot more creepiness as opposed to like.
Oh no, the
special effects.
Weird animation is very unfortunate.
Well, I mean, when you think about the other effects that were going on at this time, because I mean, the 80s, there really was kind of like a special effects revolution going on.
Right.
I think they probably felt like they had to compete, but they just didn't have the sort of the muscle behind it.
Well, it's muscle, and again, we're kind of going back to, how creative can you be? Like you don't have to have the best special effect.
There's
but
a lot
if it's put it in context and shot a certain way, you can get away with a lot less. But I think you're right. I think you're probably right. They're like, we can do this optical thing, and that'll sell it. And somebody was like, yeah, we have to. I mean, this is happening. This is happening.
Well, this is around the same time as like I think of. And immediately, this is the mid-'80s, I immediately think of Ghostbusters, which has like a lot of crazy creature effects and crazy visuals.
Gloppy practical effects, which are great, and if you look at Return to Salem's Lot, which by the way is not a good movie, but at least is very weird and interesting, which also is about a freaky small town where everybody's beholden to a strange supernatural force. In that place, they used a sort of Stan Winston-y kind of puppet to be the creature living down below he's below a house somewhere. That didn't look realistic either, but somehow there's just something slightly more interesting to look at. If He Who Walked Behind the Rose had been a prosthetic of some kind, I would have been.
Well, I kept thinking that it would be like the Tremors monster.
Sure.
Somehow.
Yeah.
Well, have you guys read? Have any of you read the actual original story?
I must confess, I never have.
I did, but it's been a really long time. I read the book before I saw the movie.
I'm wondering how Stephen King described.
I will make that my assignment to read it before next week, because it was collected in one of his anthologies. So, which is the anthology that they have actually on the dashboard at one point.
Yeah.
Which is cute.
That's funny.
But I would have been fine if it had been there's a character in the first season of Star Trek who is taken over by a vast intelligence. I think this was like Where No Man Has Gone Before. And all they did for that was his eyes glow and he talks in a strange sort of voice like he's been possessed. That would have been fine with me. I don't need Isaac to be covered in weird red squares to indicate that he's been. Right. That was.
And suddenly has a very punk rock hairdo.
Oh, it was absurd. It was just.
But it's not even as scary as just the basic look that they had for him.
No, the actor himself is extremely competent at being scary, as though he just walked on stage and he's scaring the audience. He loses it at the end when they make him do all this crazy, where they're animating over him and stuff. But Drew, did you have anything to add on this topic of the treatment of redneck?
The idea that that children are effectively the monsters in this town, and they're kind of for most of the movie they're almost portrayed sort of like zombies. They're just sort of this marauding force.
Yes.
There's been other movies. Tony brought up Children of the Damned. There's been other movies that have done this and done this very well. But to me, watching this movie, it just makes the adult hero seem inept because it takes him over half the movie. Like, oh wait, they're children. All I have to do is just slap them around a little bit and they'll fold.
Yes, and
what just struck me though when you're talking about, because where we lived also there were like Mennonites as well who were always really nice people and stuff. But moving there out of the blue, that was something I'd never encountered before. So when I saw Children of the Corn, like, I'm not saying I could see that happening, but they have this weird religion that you don't really know about that takes place. It's this occult thing. You're going around and you're a kid and you see people with bonnets and everything like that. Like that, so there's a certain point in this where I was watching it as a kid was totally different. Like, oh, what, could this happen with this crazy religion and stuff I don't know about and that kind of thing. Of course, you get to be an adult and you realize, like, oh, well,
I don't really think of this as like a I've heard the term Hicksploitation.
Yeah.
Run around a lot because I'm also from a rural area, and to me that's not really the vibe going on here. I mean, there's a little bit of that, but to me it's more just like a general. At least they were trying to have like this general aura of this comfort, but I mean, like, I don't know. It's too bland, really.
I agree with you there.
It's not fierce enough to be like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh no,
and it's not really atmospheric enough to kind of have. I mean, I guess it's going to be Southern Gothic because it's Nebraska, but it doesn't have this sort of American Gothic.
I like how you said that because there's the radio show that I like to listen to a lot, right? On Sundays, when we're driving around, I like to listen to radio shows, and CBS Radio Mystery Theater did thousands of shows, right? They recorded one a day for about 12 years, and they very heavily kept returning to the plot that we see in this movie. I mean, I'm serious. Well before Children of the Corn, but it's. John and Marcia are well-to-do. They're driving around, maybe going to buy a house in the countryside. How cool, And they drive out and they stop in a little town, and everything goes crazy because people in small towns have all kinds of weird secrets and are dangerous, And and that's what's interesting here is that Stephen King, to me, both really believes in that myth strongly, but also really enjoys. It's like he really has a great affection for this small town that will kill you.
I think Stephen King is a little bit more empathetic. I think Stephen King is a little bit more empathetic to small town life than say. I mean, Tony already said it. Rob Zombie. He doesn't. He certainly doesn't make everybody monstrous.
No, there are more. It might be that it's a microcosm, and so there's room for monsters. And then there's also always room for heroes to be. I don't know what the hell's wrong with Rob Zombie. His world is made up of if you fall below the poverty line, you're a wife-beating child molester. It's the weirdest thing. I
think where is Rob Zombie from?
I have no clue.
Because I have this very strong, like Stephen King is around enough of this stuff where he's in Maine, you think that he's seen enough of the small town life that he knows that there's redeemable things about it. Whereas I think Rob Zombie just watched Texas Chainsaw 100 bazillion times and thought it was a documentary. And believe me, there's parts of Texas that are desolate and scary, but it's not everybody's a chainsaw wielding maniac.
I certainly, living where I lived, was scared on many occasions, and I could associate with being scared of kids like this and being scared of Texas Chainsaw Massacre style Hicks. Like, I can definitely, I've encountered, I mean, definitely not this scary as that, but I've encountered people that I was close to being as scared of.
Yes.
There was actually a woman
it's not like, there's a seed of truth in all of that. But,
sure.
I think also, but it's before that. Like I was saying, like Lovecraft, anytime somebody goes to a small town in Lovecraft, there's people who will, get the torches out and stuff. But in general, the the folk, especially a few of the secret folk, they have secrets, and they're it's not that long before it becomes an Innsmouth, any given village that you go to. So
I feel like I before we move on, I would be doing a disservice to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre if I did not say that there was in fact a woman that murdered her husband in my hometown with a chainsaw.
With a chainsaw?
Well, things happen.
Yeah, but you know what? Drew? I got to say, I grew up in suburbia, Houston, and the amount of freaky-ass crimes that have happened in that little town.
The city, per capita, that's the ironic thing about it. Per capita, cities are actually way more violent.
Yeah, I grew up in the community that Andrea Yates drowned her, children in.
Oh,
yeah.
But
like that's the one that's like the one really grotesque murder I can think of for my hometown.
Yeah.
Like it's that's the thing. Like there's cities are like I lived in Dallas for 8 years, and for a while Dallas was a murder capital of the United States, and that's like people want to. And I think that's the reason why this genre exists, because it makes it, for urban people, they can go, oh no, the problem's not us. It's these people over here. They're backwards. We're not backwards. We're not right. It's these people over here.
I think that also they hit upon, one of the things they're hitting upon is because it's more rare in, say, a rural setting, a lot of people tie that in with also the stuff that happens that's really freaky is secret and private and underground. And so when it's exposed, it's double like, whoa, where did that come from? Like in a rural setting. And so I think that's what a lot of it kind of plays off of, those stories. And when something really bad happens, the whole community is like, holy crap. He was always so quiet, Yeah. Ed Gein, like, whoa. How do we not know this guy was out, at his house with his mom and his, putting together
and the whole community
will
know him. I mean, that's what's useful about a small town is, by the way, just this pure matter of convenience, which is that a couple can drive into a small town, and it effectively allows them to drive into, into a new, to use the words of all the outlining books that we have, they enter a new world. Right, and in small towns are perfect for that, because everyone is a new world. It has its own boundaries and all that. By the way, Rob Zombie, I just found it, is from Haverhill, Massachusetts, and
what's the population of that? Just for my curiosity.
Haverhill, Massachusetts, and I have number numbness, so it's difficult to grasp. But I'm looking, 61,000 people. So that's it's a small-ish town. So it's Massachusetts. So what are you gonna do?
I have to throw this out there because this will change the subject, but I really want to go back to kind of talking about the way these adults are just sort of overtaken by these kids.
Yeah. Okay.
It just did not.
And this is your topic anyway. So
yeah,
so,
I've seen movies where they make this plausible. I did not find this plausible here.
So how does the child murder happen to start out in this picture?
Well, the first they're all in the first scene is very good. It's like they're in this this sort of classic American diner that just about every town has, and a kid's getting a milkshake, and it's Sunday, so they've just had church, and basically all the young people, everybody under the age of 19 basically just starts going on a murder spree. And that, because it's out of surprise, the sort of surprise of that seems kind of believable to me.
Why?
Because if you're in shock, you're in shock of what's happening. Like, you're a parent. You're not going to expect your kid to suddenly just up and turn on you. That's not.
But I mean, why is it believable that these kids would do this? See, that's the thing I don't like.
I'm not saying it's necessarily believable as to why they would do it. I'm saying it's believable that they could overpower.
Oh yeah.
No, I don't buy it, because for the rest of the movie, I just have a problem with the idea that these children could overpower, even in large numbers, could just overpower it. Like, and they're led by that Malachi kid who is so, like, he looks like a Howdy Doody doll with 1980s hair.
Oh,
like
he has the righteous hair, though. Malachi is that.
I think Malachi's creepy.
That big man.
He is not creepy. Just punch him in his giant horse teeth.
Well, I don't know what you're wanting for him to be. I mean, he's as a right-hand man, he's a thug. Like, he's
a little bit like maybe they should have gotten a bit of a bigger kid.
Possibly.
You know, like he's a little.
Enough. I don't know, man. I don't know what you're.
He's not creepy to me. He's not scary. I don't know. He just looks, like I said, he looks like a Howdy Doody doll, which I guess is like small town or whatever. But like I think they should have got like maybe a bigger kid that I could believe that.
That is a way that could have gone. I had no big complaints with Malachi because I thought he was good enough for what it is. I agree that he doesn't have any of the charisma of Isaac, not remotely.
I just kept the Outlander, and it's just like, God, shut up. Just shut up. When like I wanted when the hero finally just was like, oh, this is just a scrawny teenager. I could beat the crap out of him. I don't know what I've been so scared of. Like it takes him like almost the entire movie, and that finally dawns on him, and it takes him like 5 seconds to take him out.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's the thing. So to me, the whole business of how easy, like I say, if it's been 3 years that they've been on their own, why is it so easy for Peter Horton to show up and all of a sudden everything turns out? And particularly the brainwashing part, because they've been completely brainwashed so much so that they killed all the adults and have managed to live now 3 years. And Peter Horton shows up and just says a few words, and suddenly they're all like, "Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, we've been wrong all this time. We shouldn't be killing people. We're just going to turn around now and you can go." Like, if you
by the way,
what happens to those kids after they leave?
Yeah,
like they take the two kids, but there's all those kids that are left behind.
I don't know. I mean, I guess he's going to send. So let's think about this a second. Let's pretend that this is real. So, Hewitt, Texas, little suburb of Waco, turns out all the adults are dead, and there's just a bunch of ravenous, angry children there that have their own little church, and they've been living there for 3 years.
Well, they killed all the adults, so they're going to get. Assuming anybody finds them, they're going to go to prison. They're going to go to juvie.
Or at least juvie.
Right. So we will institutionalize them.
Yeah.
This is not a good scenario. There's not much good that's going to happen. I fear for the foster families that are.
They won't be in foster care. They'll be in juvie. I'm telling you, they'll stay in there until they're old enough to be in regular jail, and they'll probably end up there.
Well,
I always get the impression too that what we're supposed to think, and it's not really clear, is that they are being helped. Like, it's not just them. There's a supernatural thing that's helping to push this,
Yeah.
But then why would Peter Horton be so easy? Why would it be so easy?
Well, that's just bad writing on the part of the.
She's right. She's right. Like if it's so easy to sway them, how is it that Isaac convinced them? Hey, would be really keen? Let's all worship the corn god and murder our parents Sunday.
Right.
Who's down for that? Like, if there's, maybe they're just that easily swayed,
Well, I think that it's powerful enough. Now, ways you could set it up better would be, the adults not really digging that there's this power. Some people are fearful. In a lot of the other ones, you'd have some preacher guy going, "Hey, that's bad. You guys don't follow the evil guy. Like, don't follow the devil." Even though it's part of their local lore, right? And so there's a lot of different ways. Yes, it's inconsistent, but I always have got the impression that what we're supposed to think is it's not just the kids revolting, it's also that, Isaac knows just how to do it because he's been told by this being.
Yes.
If you do this, he's assured me that this will kill, we can get all the adults, right? Like, this is his plan. When they start their plan, it's been premeditated for quite some time. In fact, the girl who's drawing pictures, we get the impression she knows ahead of time because she starts.
She's psychic somehow.
So, that it's not just all of a sudden they get together and they've got, slingshots and crayons. It's that, the Beast has told us, if we do this, we're going to get away with it and start our own new thing. And then he's going to have, kids. When you're 19, you're going to go to him. Isn't that awesome? So there's a plan. Whether it's the best plan, that, that's a totally different thing. But, I think that's always what I got.
I have a feeling that in the short story, a lot of these inconsistencies probably don't matter as much.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure because I remember reading it and, I don't remember going, that's stupid,
Well, and how did the old guy at the gas station make it as long as he did? Because apparently all it took was his dog to be interested in the cornfield for him to get killed. And I'm like, well, wouldn't the dog have been interested?
I think they did that just so they would have some kind of, because it was an 80s horror film and they needed some kind of body count because there really isn't that many characters in this movie.
That's true.
So,
that's true. I mean, in fact, we should move on into the presentation of this, but I just wanted to mention really quickly that Peter Horton gives us a theory, though. So you're exactly right, Tony, that, I believe that you're right, that we can kind of take some of the blame off of the kids because there's this evil force that's perverted them. That's true. But Peter Horton gives us at least the thesis of the screenwriter, which is a kind of a crazy thing he says, but, if you're into this, then that's what you believe. He goes, did listening to all those holy rollers make it so that you would believe anything? In other words, that's the thesis in the end, which is that fundamentalist religion is softening people up for craziness, and
no, well, I would agree with that. Like, I mean, as far as how ingrained,
there is
like that is, and that's what led to like why it was believable that you could have Satanists and stuff like that. Just out in the,
oh my
you
God,
go too far, like.
How weird is it? Oh my God, think about this, guys. I mean, if we have listeners who are coming in from Bleeding Cool and who are like way younger than us, like maybe in high school or college, they will have no memory of the weird Satanism freakout that happened like 20 years ago. That just blows my mind that it actually happened. That like people were getting arrested.
I still to this day want to like have a fake documentary where it's like people show up and they're like deep in Dungeons and Dragons land, and then show like an actual like what your friends and you were like when you were playing Dungeons and Dragons. Like for the most part, where it was like, hey, we are like pimply kids and we're talking geeky stuff and we're eating pizza, and it's so not anything satanic or even remotely wanting to be satanic.
Yeah.
And, because here's the deal I still hold. If all of that stuff, if heavy metal and Satanism led to actual superpowered Satanism, where you were a powerful Satan-worshipping, you were the top of your whatever you were, none of the jocks would survive.
Right.
All of the geeks, pimply geeks, would have cheerleader girlfriends. Everything. It would have been. The landscape would have been unrecognizable.
You're right.
There would never be another like swirly or wedgie. Like all of it would be punished by serpents and frogs and whatever else you could think of. If that was true, if all of that stuff led to actual like what we see in horror movies, but instead, we got what we got.
Well, but the interesting thing about the religion here, though, it's not Satanism. It's got like a weird, like self-styled Christianity thing going on.
No, it's also like it's less Satanism and more like, some forms of kind of pagan religion that go back to, the field.
Well, I think it reminds me a lot of the Wicker Man.
As opposed to, it's more of an evil force than it is a lot of more.
Actually, the Wicker Man is a much better version of this same kind of story.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I think that's right. Oh boy, is Wicker Man on Netflix? Julia,
I think it was for a while, but I don't know if it still is.
And not the Nicolas Cage version, the Christopher Lee version.
No,
very important.
No, God, no. You don't replace Christopher Lee with Ellen Burstyn. That's absurd.
How did it burn?
I mean, I feel for the poor man with the bees and all that, but I mean, still, for the love of money. Okay,
No, that
all
is
right.
good.
What was our next topic? Because I know that we've probably gone far afield. Oh yeah, we were going to talk about the presentation of the movie. I wanted to talk about really why I think the movie fails, and I'd love to hear from you guys. But to me, the reason the movie fails, and even though to be honest with you, I still enjoyed watching it, and I would probably even watch it again. But the reason I think the movie fails is it has literally almost. There is almost no mood at all. It is brightly lit.
Yeah.
It feels every bit as tense as an episode of In the Heat of the Night. It is like Matlock with crazy children. There's, it's just
perfect.
A bunch of people walk around in brightly lit, practical sets, and it's sort of, lazily edited together. There's almost nothing here that feels like a horror movie.
The crazy thing is the poster has all the atmosphere that this movie should have had. It's got this, the silhouettes of the corn with this child's hand holding up a scythe.
Yeah.
And that's what you think this movie's going to be like, and it looks so much like like a TV movie. Only there's been Stephen King TV movies that are a lot more atmospheric than this.
Yes.
I would much rather see Dark Knight of the Scarecrow from '81 than this movie, like any day. Like as far as atmosphere, and it's not an especially great movie. But if I was to, pick something
Halloween,
that had,
we talked about Halloween on the podcast. I mean, that's
but Dark Knight of the Scarecrow has the whole out in the fields kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I remember that being scary at the time. Maybe, who knows? It probably doesn't even hold up as well. Looks like you can watch it on YouTube. But anyway, just in general, it's everything. Most things happen during the day. The only really effective one is the kid trying to escape the cult and then getting hit by a car. That's really the part where you're just like, whoa. And I think maybe that's what we remember.
What's distracting about that, though, is it's so sloppy in terms of the editing and continuity. Like, there's so many times when you're like, wait, the kid was flipped over and now he's flipped back, and wait, the kid's breathing, and why are there tire tracks in front of the car? Stuff like that just distracted me so much because it was just so sloppily done.
Also got really obnoxious, every now and then narration from the lead kid, and he'll say something, the thing that I remember is when the movie starts, he goes, "It was 3 years ago," and then immediately after that, on screen, it says, 3 years ago. So he's constantly describing something that is unnecessary. And I was like,
that's so bad.
He's got a really good career ahead of him as a middle manager who reads the PowerPoint slides. Yes, it's going to be awesome.
After all the therapy.
Yeah.
Lord knows.
Yeah, because, he's going to show you the slide, and it's going to have a projection. It's going to say, 30% uptake, and he's going to say, and here's this, as you can see, 30% uptake, and we're like, geez, can you just send us those slides? And he gets to be that guy. There you go. Yeah. He may have made PowerPoint for all we know.
I love the little house they were in, by the way. Their sort of rambling country house that they had, if they didn't have to slaughter all their parents, the notion of just camping out in a town and having it all to yourself was kind of cool. But there's basically, as a presentation, this is just it literally, I don't know. It feels like a very beginner's kind of work. I would say Carpenter could have done much, much better with this material, but let's be honest, Carpenter sometimes phones it in himself. I mean, Carpenter did Village of the Damned, the remake, and it's...
Village of the Damned, the remake, is 1,000 times better than this.
Okay. It may well be. I mean, and I would watch it again because I remember it being pretty good. I remember Christopher Reeve being pretty good, but, I don't remember it. I remember it still having that same sort of extremely brightly lit look of a TV movie. And I don't know what causes that. I don't know. I have no idea. I couldn't begin to tell you, unless it's just color correction, and all they need to do is get
that, and I think for you may shoot a lot more in the day because it's less expensive. to shoot to light a day scene. You know, I think that's a factor. You know, when it's not. But I guess a lot of stuff was shot on film, so it's not like the difference between film and video. So I think it's, I think it's just that where everything's overlit because, you know, that's when you shoot. If you want to shoot or cheaper, you shoot during the day.
Yeah. Well, we should wrap up. Let's do our final thoughts. And I don't remember, who did we go? Julia, Drew, Tony, Jason, or how did we do it?
Yeah,
okay.
I think so.
So Julia, final thoughts.
Well, so we said we don't like it. I will say the things I do like. I actually did like the kids. There's a couple of kids that I thought were terrible, but I liked Malachi just fine. I thought he was pretty creepy. I thought Isaac was a find, and I thought the siblings were quite delightful. I mean, I really liked them. I'm a fan of Peter Horton. I think he did fine, as well as, you know, could be expected. And of course, Linda Hamilton is she's just fun to have in the movie at that age that she is pretty much when she does the first Terminator movie.
Yeah.
So, you know, so it's that the cast I think was kind of neat, and it's a shame because it's really the movie, you know, they're wasted on this movie. But you know, so again, I'm intrigued by the fact that it is as much of a classic as it is, given that it's just not very high quality. So, but I'm glad we watched it because it does, you know, it's important to figure that out, I guess. Anyway, that's it.
Very cool. Drew, final thoughts, Children of the Corn?
You know, if you haven't already watched it to take part in the podcast, I would say skip it. Like, I really, you know, nostalgia got me very excited about watching this movie, but nostalgia can sometimes lead you in the wrong direction, and I just really had a hard time getting through this movie. I thought it was kind of a snooze fest, and, you know, this is coming from somebody who really, really, really likes 1980s horror films.
Mm-hmm.
I just, you know, there's, you know, pass and see there's other things that you could be watching. You know, me personally, I wanted to be watching another episode of Breaking Bad. So there you go.
All right, outstanding. Wow, that's 2 for 2. Tony, final thoughts, Children of the Corn.
I think I think the casting was pretty excellent, and I think everybody's kind of working with what they had. But again, it's kind of like what you said, like it feels very TV movie. It just kind of goes, but it doesn't, it's hard, like you don't really feel much of the stakes. Again, the only part that you really feel is the kid running, you know, through the corn, getting hit by a car, and the, you know, the remorse of like, holy crap, we just hit a kid. All of that stuff, all that business right around that area, you know, everything past that is just kind of like, it just goes, and it's not terrible, but it's not good, you know? It's like, okay. I mean, I didn't want my time back or anything like that, and I kind of understood, like, oh, yeah. I mean, I think it's a classic because of when it was and kind of what it did, you know, was of that era. Again, I think it fed off a little bit of the kind of prevailing, oh, my gosh, Satanism, oh, my gosh, small towns, could happen to you. You know, rock and roll is, you know, could cause our kids to rebel. In this case, rock and roll is a creature that, you know, lives between the fields. But that kind of, like, feeling, I think, is really why it was what it was. And if you're a kid, you know, this is why Drew was like, man, I was really excited because we saw this and we kind of, you kind of felt something. You watch it as an adult. Maybe that's the magic of it, actually, you know. Maybe this movie wasn't even meant for us. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe you're right.
Maybe it's only meant for children.
Or, you know, teenagers.
Well, teenagers.
It's possible. But I think maybe that's a possibility. And, you know, that's fine, too. Again, I feel bad I didn't read the story. I should have reread it, but to compare. But, yeah, I didn't, you know, again, I agree with Drew that I don't really need to see this again. I'm not sad that I watched it, but it certainly doesn't leave any lasting impression other than some bad special effects and a few bits that are pretty grisly here and there. There's other, kids taking over. I mean, I think you could take this premise and really do something. You could do a lot more with it. You could have the parents out at odds with the kids and factions. You could have the paganism part at odds with the Southern Baptist kind of mentality are there. There's any number of things you could do within that framework and make it a better movie. But we have what we have here. So
to interrupt you for a second, in the chat room, Darren brought up, well, hey, now wait a minute, there is the church scene, and by that he's talking, I think, about this scene where there's, for once in the movie, a lot of really neat, thought put into the presentation. So there's the ears of corn, everywhere, and the paintings have been,
Sure. And there's a lot of really cool image. There is actually a lot of cool imagery. When you take away the stupid special effects, the cop, the blue man iconography, where it's this, mummified cop on the corn, and how they present Linda Hamilton when they capture her, and all the little corn doll things and all that stuff.
Well,
there's a lot of good business.
There's a lot of passages written on the walls in the church and things.
Sure.
Like that.
There's a lot of good business, but it doesn't congeal into something memorable unless you saw it at an age where you were like, wow, that was something else. Seeing as adults, and again, we're also
himself. The fact that they have to sacrifice themselves when they turn 19.
Yeah.
The guy carves a pentagram on his chest, and he's like, yeah, I'm doing this because of whatever love for the.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of
Lord.
stuff there. It just doesn't congeal into something where you're, where as an adult, and especially an adult who's seen a lot of horror movies, where you revisit and you're like, oof, I kind of wish I had left those impressions behind. I think that's what Drew kind of mirrored. So.
Oh, absolutely.
I had a similar thought. I mean, I still have a fondness for it, and I can completely see myself letting this play in the background while I do other stuff. In other words, I could see putting this one into rotation, whereas there's a lot of movies that I would never watch again, and not because I find them necessarily repulsive, but I kind of feel, even though I said it's artless, I have a certain fondness for the movie, and I kind of like how washed out and ridiculously TV-ish the movie is. I wonder about that magic you were talking about, Tony, where you watch a movie when you're a teenager and you take it in and then you remember it a certain way and then you see it again and it's not that way at all. And I don't know why that is, but it makes me wonder if we're ever actually, I'm not trying to be deep here, but it makes me wonder if we're ever actually seeing anything clearly in the first place. That you watch a movie and when you're watching it the first time, it just completely will impress you with maybe its structure or whatever, and with exceptions when something's terrible, and you can go back later when the spell is worn off and go, oh, well, that wasn't as well structured as I thought, and actually those characters weren't all that well defined and so forth.
Well, as geeky as it is, I think cinema a lot of times is, like the tree in Empire, like you get exactly like you bring into it. Watch, again, I think go back to watching was it Room 37, that documentary?
Yes.
So there's some people in there who you're like, I don't. You have good points, but I don't think Kubrick was really doing that. And I think that's the way. I think that.
I just watched that, and I agree. It's crazy how so many people were kind of reading a lot of things into that.
And so much so that they don't even think of it that way. To them I knew a priest in college who was convinced that The Little Mermaid was about, it had something to do with The Little Mermaid represented the Virgin Mary, and the Sea Witch was like Protestantism or something, and I mean, and this was all abundantly clear to.
Well, and Frozen's all about turning everybody into lesbians. Did you know that?
The which what? The what?
Frozen is all about turning people into lesbians.
That I have to admit that made no sense to me at all. I can go with the whole somehow or another Ariel is the Virgin Mary. Okay, fine. I do not understand how Frozen, which is essentially completely heterosexual, can make lesbians out of little girls. I don't know. That made no sense to me at all.
Shows what you know about snowmen, Jason. It's all there. If you were just paying attention to what the snowman says, you would totally see it. I don't even know how you could miss it. I mean, it's so obvious.
Oh, my God. But we have two little girls, by the way, and they sing that stuff all the time, man. So it was very interesting to come back and look at this movie again, and I am not at all sorry that I did. You know, I really enjoyed capturing it again, and having the chance to. Tony, I'm going to think a lot more about your image of movies as the tree in The Empire Strikes Back that you find inside it, what you carry into it.
I have a comedy that I hate, and that I wanted to see Hellraiser 2, and they wouldn't let me in because I was a few months shy of being 17, and I couldn't go in, and I had to go see this stupid comedy. And it may be the funniest thing ever, but guess what? I hated it.
Yeah.
Hated it. There's no way, and I can't watch it because I was just still like, man, this sucks. You know?
I know exactly
like it's that kind of thing. Like, you know, a lot of times, I mean, that, you know, you want to go in objectively, and I think it happens with critics as well. Like, if you're having a bad day and you're a critic, hopefully you're good enough to where that doesn't matter, but you can't possibly go see a movie if your pets died or what, you know what I mean?
Right,
like,
no. Or how
like
about
all of that kind of stuff. And I think, you know, the time period as well as the, you know, all of the stuff that's going on colors what makes our, you know, our favorite movie or why this struck a chord at the time, et cetera, and why it may not work now, you know.
I mean, you know, imagine that you know, that what happens with me with that is like, let's say you're in high school and there's a girl that you're really in love with, but she instead has a boyfriend, and her boyfriend has introduced her to like this one particular movie series or something that's really awesome. You will hate that thing, no matter how good it is. You know? or they're going to be all into Styx, and so from now on, you're just going to think that Styx sucks. And anybody,
right.
You know, I don't know why I picked Styx there. That's sort of a reach, but.
All right, who likes Styx that you hated? Just figure that out.
I have no memory of any of that. When I think of Styx now, I think of like, you know, roller skating. You know.
Me too. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Also, anyway, Desert Moon. Let's do some endorsements. The same direction. I don't know if you guys have any endorsements for this. If you don't have it, that's totally fine. Julia, do you have anything to endorse this week?
Well, this is a follow-up to my endorsement from last time, which was The Return, the French movie, the show The Return, and then I said that there was the new show coming out. Well, apparently there's actually two new shows, Jason was telling me, but the one that has already come out is Resurrection, and it's really pretty good. It's Omar Epps, from who I watched on House, I Love House, and it's just a really neat show about people who are just coming back, who have been dead for years, suddenly coming back, and, you know, it's kind of a question of, are they zombies, or are they clones, are they aliens taking the form of these, what are these people? So it's a really interesting story for horror fans, I think.
Yeah, it is really, really good. In fact, I'll hit a similar one in a bit. Drew, you have any endorsements for us?
I have a couple of endorsements. One of them is self-serving. But first off, I discovered through Netflix Bates Motel, the first season, which was something when I initially heard about it.
Is that worth watching? Do I need
totally
to
worth watching?
So.
Totally worth watching. It does kind of suffer a little bit from Smallville-itis, but the kid that they have playing Norman Bates is just, and the lady playing his mother, they are just so magnetic and so great in their parts. I mean, he doesn't outright ape or copy Anthony Perkins, but he has little, like, facial tics that he does that are kind of borrowed from Anthony Perkins, while at the same time he's still like his own. Like the two lead performances are really what makes the show worth watching, and you know it's just really great to watch these two characters interact with each other. Like
I don't understand, and I have not watched a single episode of that or Hannibal or Dracula. So Bates Motel, this is about teenage Norman. Is that right?
It's about Norman and his mother. It's contemporary, which was the thing that confused me at first, because I was expecting it to take place
in the 30s.
The 50s, like the 40s or the 50s or something, and it takes place contemporary. So that kind of threw me for a loop, especially since they kind of dress the kid who plays Norman and his mom in this sort of retrograde fashion, even though everybody else is contemporary. But again, the performances are really what makes it worthwhile, because I was against the show when I first heard about it. I was like, oh, that's such a creatively bankrupt idea. And you know, we kind of watched the first episode on a whim, and we plowed through the first season, and I'm kind of going through withdrawal. Like, I wish that there was more of it up on Netflix. It's just so, you know, again, it was because of how good the two leads are, it's absolutely enthralling. And, you know, for fans of Psycho, they keep teasing you with the Psycho theme music, and I'm betting they are going to build up to something where they give you like the full on, you know, like they keep teasing that. It hasn't quite happened yet. The other thing that I am going to plug, this is a plug rather than an endorsement, my wife's band, Danger Cakes, and Bat City Surfers, this is another Austin band, and this is specifically if you are an Austinite, are playing with Heartfelt Hearts from San Diego, California, this Saturday at the Badlands. And first of all, Heartfelt Hearts is a really great band, and if you haven't seen them before, you're going to be in for a treat. They're really, really, really good. But also, you know, Bat City Surfers are probably, you know, in my top 10 favorite local Austin bands right now. So it's going to be a fun show. I'm very excited about it, and doors are at 9, so please come by.
Wonderful. Tony, did you have anything to endorse?
Yeah, I've got a couple things. One of them, actually 3 now. I was going to say I need to post, a friend of mine, Max Meehan, made a video that uses the Bates Motel Psycho kind of framing as his video. And in fact, the site that has it, FearNet, did a preview of it. And they kind of delved into like, hey, if you're watching Bates Motel, you should check out this video. So I'm going to post that on our Facebook page.
Please do.
Because I think it's kind of a cool, like it ties into that, kind of has that synchronicity. And it's a really good, like his friend of mine hadn't seen his video work, and then I saw the video and I was like, wow, man, that's really, looks really great. So pretty cool stuff. I also enjoyed, it's really breezy and not very deep, but really cool, a French movie, a Luc Besson movie, The Extraordinary Adventures of Adele Blanc-Sec, which is like based on a comic, French comic, and it's really fun. Like, again, you know, a lot of the like Rotten Tomatoes reviews were like, oh, it's, you know, not deep and blah, 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 but it's got a pterodactyl running around. It's got a, you know, awesome female heroine, and it's got mummies that walk around, and Rain and I watched it. It was a lot of fun, I thought. You know, it doesn't get super deep, but I really, really enjoyed it. It had it was nice to take in something kind of really light and, like, just fun for a change. And it's on Netflix, like it just came out, and, you know, having done Clockworks, like I'm always looking for a new kind of, you know, tale that mixes all kinds of adventure and stuff in the genre. So I'll post, you know, the Netflix link as well. And then also my self-serving for the first time this year, if you are also in Austin on Friday, this Friday, the 21st, my band Deserts of Mars is playing. If you like the podcast and you want to see what the heck we're talking about when we say bassist and lead singer of Deserts of Mars, we play late. I think we go on next to last, and it's at Beerland. But it's all, like, we put together a really good show. There's like a garagey band, One Good Lung, a metal band, Never, and a band I've been trying to play with for a while called Skyacre that has kind of a lot of heavy and a lot of, like, majestic kind of stuff going on. And then Deserts of Mars, of course. But, yeah, if you're, listening to the podcast and you are in Austin, we're really trying to really push it, and people have been really responsive lately. So I hope to see you, and we can talk horror movies before and afterwards.
Oh, that'd be
or
so
at least in between when people are getting set up, because I try to stay for all and listen to all the bands. But that's this Friday. So March 23rd.
Who is the next? And my only endorsement. So I have two endorsements, and one I don't know what it is. It's going to come out of the next question. The first endorsement I keep. I know I've mentioned this before, but I have to mention it again. Is turn off your screens and spend some time listening to CBS Radio Mystery Theater, which you can get free online, and it will just stretch. It stretches my mind about how to convey story quickly, and and set up conversations and do things without showing. And I learn a lot from listening to radio dramas. It's really inspiring to me. So that's my plug for looking up CBS Radio Mystery Theater, which I know I've plugged probably 5 times before. But my other endorsement is watch ahead of time whatever it is that we're going to do next. So who's next? Is it Julia or is it Tony?
I think I'm last. I think I begged. I'm still undecided. I've been busy with craziness, and so.
And Julia, have you chosen what we're going to watch yet?
Yeah, no. Remember I said we were going to watch The Ninth Gate because it's Johnny Depp, and I've never seen it.
Oh, well, there you go.
I try to watch all Johnny Depp movies.
So that's my endorsement, Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp in The Ninth Gate. So
Roman Polanski is The Ninth Gate.
Is it Polanski?
It is a Polanski movie.
Awesome.
All right, outstanding. Well, very good. That'll be probably our second Polanski movie as well. All right, I really appreciate everybody listening, and I was thankful for Darren being in the chat room. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Come on to the Facebook page and argue with us and post things, like us there, leave reviews on iTunes, and tell your friends. And thank you so much. I'll talk to you guys next week.
Good night, John Boy.
Night.